Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 30th of November of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Kiev, because about Ukraine, about the global things, about this territory, and the most important that Ukrainians, Zelensky to be more precise, took a decision there are going to be no elections in Ukraine, neither president elections nor parliament. So obviously he had an agreement with the parliament that the parliament will support him, and for this Zelensky is not going to start the parliament elections, and this is not very good for Zelensky, for the only one opposite person in Ukraine for Zelensky. So, and furthermore, Zelensky continue pressing and pushing Zelensky from his position. Furthermore, today we got a lot of updates that Zelensky was traveling a lot. In the morning we got updates that Zelensky visited the Kherson area, but we haven't received even a single video, and the sources are saying that he arrived in this area personally to force the Ukrainians to continue their landing operation in this area, and to force people, to inspire people to fight with the Russians and so on, because as you know, according to information we have, there are around 60 till 70% of every single brigade in Ukrainian army who refuse to follow the orders, because they understand that most of them are just a suicide operation. Later we got update that Zelensky visited Kupiansk area, and from this area we got some video, geolocated video, not geolocated video, but just the video where Zelensky and Syrsky is the commander of Ukrainian infantry army, was reporting Zelensky about the situation, about the problems and many other things, explaining him the situation on the ground. Then Zelensky awarded a few Ukrainian soldiers. He talked a lot, and after this video Zelensky appeared in Kiev, and in Kiev he was talking with the students, and that was also very interesting video, because Zelensky was interviewed with the students and he was talking about the reintegration of Crimea and Donbass. So obviously he's the only one man who believes that Crimea and Donbass will become a part of Ukraine, that the Ukrainians are able to return the territory under Ukraine control. Maybe it's gonna happen, maybe not, we can't know for sure, but I'm not sure that the things that and the way he explained this reintegration is going to happen obviously is going to take place, because I don't believe his words. Now let's start from the situation on the ground, and first we're going to talk about Kherson direction. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 55 soldiers, 2 armored vehicles, and there were no losses among the artillery systems. On this video, for example, we can see how the Russians managed to discover in the vicinity of Tyaginka 2 Ukrainian tanks, and as a result of Lancet strike, those 2 tanks were destroyed. It's very interesting what the tanks were doing in the area of Tyaginka, because Tyaginka is the area where the Ukrainians concentrate, accumulate, and create the next offensive operation, landing operation on the Russian bank of the river. If we increase the number of updates since the beginning of November, we're gonna see the complete Russian superiority in this area with Lancet strikes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So more than 12 cases, geolocated cases of Lancet strike, and every single strike means another destroyed armored vehicle or artillery system, mainly the artillery system. So obviously the Ukrainians on the Russian bank of the river do have problems with support with artillery forces from the Ukrainian bank of the river. When talking about Krynki, we haven't received geolocations during the day from this territory, but it doesn't mean that there are no clashes. Obviously there are very heavy clashes, but for now we haven't received anything. Also, the Russians continue bombardments of Ukraine positions on the second foothold in the vicinity of Pridniprovsk. The same story, FPV drones, Ukrainian soldiers who are suffering, and probably Zelensky arrived in Kherson to inspire these guys below the bridges on Krynki front line to fight more and to waste their lives for probably reintegration of Donbass and Crimea. The Ukrainians from their side published just one video, how they managed to discover the Russian air defense system Buk-M1, and as a result of HIMARS strike, that air defense system was destroyed. So that was the only geolocation, plus more or less important geolocation from this direction. Now we are moving to Zaporozhye area. We also got some updates from this territory. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes on this direction, the Ukrainians lost 30 soldiers and 3 armored vehicles. As you can see, the level of losses is the lowest on this area. There are no changes, and the most important that, as we know, that most of the brigades, most of the forces who can still fight with the Russians were redeployed to Avdiivka direction. For example, the Western deployment map has already updated their map showing the 116th Brigade in the Avdiivka direction. Well, we did the same on the military summary map, so we see just artillery regular duels, no changes on the ground. There were a few videos of Ukrainian squads, Ukrainian groups were moving from one position to another. The Russians were using night vision equipment, and as a result of this reconnaissance operation, the Ukrainians were discovered their positions and destroyed as a result of artillery fire. So no changes on the ground, just a regular military routine. Now let's go to the South Donetsk direction. We have few interesting geolocations. We have another destroyed artillery system as a result of Lancet strike. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes on this direction, the Ukrainians lost 100 soldiers and 6 armored vehicles, including 1 tank. On this video we can see another Ukrainian artillery system that was discovered and destroyed with the strike of Lancet. So nothing special. Few updates are coming from Novomykhailovka and Marinka. And when talking about Novomykhailovka, the operational pause, according to my feelings, understanding, is too long. The Russians published these scenes, how they managed to discover the Ukrainian soldiers who were trying to redeploy probably from one position to another during the night period of time, and they were basically destroyed as a result of artillery fire, or maybe as a result of missile fire. So this is the situation in this area, and usually the Russians attack 2-3 days, and they need 1 week to restore their power, and then they attack one more time. So it's about to start the next wave of attack in the direction of Novomykhailovka, so I suppose that even by the end of this week we're gonna see some clashes in this area as well. The Ukrainians published the video of the FPV drone strikes against the coal mine Trudovskaya on the south of Krasnogorovka on the north of Marinka. We are using this video just to confirm that the Russians still have control over this territory and that they haven't left this area. So this area is under complete Russian control. And now we're moving to the most interesting probably territory, to Avdiivka direction. We got a lot of geolocations from the north and from the south. Before we start, I would like to remind you that according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 270 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, and 1 counter-artillery radar AN-TPQ-37. Furthermore, the Russians reported that as a result of missile strikes, they managed to discover the headquarters of 53rd Mechanized Brigade of Ukrainian forces and the command and observation post of the artillery battalion of 31st Mechanized Brigade. And as a result of strikes in the area of Novogrodovka and in the city of Krasnoarmeysk or Pokrovsk, those 2 command centers were destroyed. This is the area of Novogrodovka. According to the Russians, the 31st Mechanized, the headquarters of 31st Mechanized Battalion of that brigade was destroyed. I'll remind you that when talking about 31st, as we discussed yesterday, the main area of responsibility of this brigade is located on the line between Ocheretino, Novokalinovo, Keramik. So this is the brigade that the Russians are trying to attack currently and push the Ukraine positions. And 53rd Brigade is located on the south on the line Tonenka, Severna, Lastochkina. So these 2 brigades were pretty damaged, so probably there are very high chances that during the next few days the Russians will try their luck and attack in these 2 directions as well. Now we are moving to the northern area. We got few updates. One video wasn't geolocated. I added softly just for your understanding, to understand how the Ukrainians are making evacuation in this area. On this video we see 2 Ukrainian wounded soldiers who were evacuated from the combat line. As you can see, they are very exhausted, very dirty, and that's like an awful situation for the Ukrainians. I don't know what they're fighting for, but so this is the reality. This is the reality that Ukrainians are forced to face, according to the let's call it like ex-prime minister of United Kingdom wish to continue fighting. I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Now we're moving to Stepove and Berdych. We got also a few interesting geolocations from this territory. For example, when talking about Stepove, we see how the Ukrainians were trying to evacuate the rest of their garrison from the village, from the western part, using Max Pro armored vehicle, but the Russians managed to discover, and as a result of artillery strike or FPV drone strike, that evacuation machine, light vehicle, was destroyed. The same story took place in the vicinity, in the city, in the village by the name of Berdichi. The Ukrainians were running away also from Stepove using light vehicle. They were moving along the street, the first street of the village. The Russians also managed to create some ambush, and as a result of artillery strike, that vehicle was destroyed. So what I'm trying to say that currently the Ukrainians are trying to evacuate their soldiers from Petrovska or Stepove. So currently this territory either in the gray zone or under complete Russian control, because we got another update that Ukrainian confirms about Russian progress in the city. So if you remember, during the previous days we discussed that the Russians were forced to step back from this territory, and the main reason why the Russians left this territory was that the bad weather, that there were complete absence of possibility to use FPV drones to control this territory, to counterattack the Ukrainians, and the Russians stepped back towards the railways. And now the Russians, the weather got better, and the Russians launched counteroffensive, and now we see that Ukrainians are forced to step back, and the Ukrainians are trying to redeploy their main position, their edge positions to Berdichi. So I expect that maybe even this week we're gonna see the first clashes for this village as well. Now we are moving to the southern area. We got a lot of updates, a lot of geolocations. As you can see, the Russians started bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions along a Sinovata line, the street that goes from the south, that connects Avdiivka, a main area with industrial zone. So the Russians start bombing this. We see the Russians move their focus from industrial area to the residential area, and this is like, we can say that this is the beginning of artillery preparation before the next waves of attack of the Russian forces. If we increase the numbers of updates, let's say from the 19th of November, we see the Russian focus along this line to Tsarskaya Khota, and along the Sinovata line, and along in the vicinity or in the part of this residential area. So, and the second interesting video we got from the southern part of Avdiivka, from the Donetsk road. As you can see, according to this map, and most of the mappers show this territory under Russian control, but we got the video of rotation process of the Ukrainians. So this is the beginning of the video. 3 Ukrainian soldiers were moving to the positions to change the Ukrainians. This is the beginning of the video. They were moving, and they managed to rotate the Ukrainian forces, and this is the area of Ukrainian rotation. This is the flag on the map. And after they complete the rotation, those forces who left these fortifications and moved to the tree line, to the southern Avdiivka area, and on this area they were discovered and got into ambushed because this road was under complete Russian fire control, and basically they were destroyed. So when talking about the movements, the Ukrainians were moving something like this. They rotate Ukrainians in this area, then they move to the north, and in this area they were destroyed. So according to that video, that video was very fresh, recent, this territory probably is under Ukrainian control or in the gray zone. So if you remember, during the first phase of Russian offensive operation that took place in October, the Russians managed to establish control over these 2 footholds, but as I see, as a result of Ukrainian counterattacks or FPV drone strikes, the Russians were forced to step back. So this is the situation in this area. Now we are moving further to Bakhmut, Artyomovsk direction. We also got a lot of updates. The Russians continue offensive operation. The most interesting and strangest thing is that we haven't received even a single geolocation from this territory, but we have a lot of updates. The Russians continue offensive operation. The sources are saying that as a result of offensive, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians made lots of reconnaissance in force, lots of attacks trying to understand the Ukrainian positions and so on. They undertake a lot of reconnaissance attacks, and as a result of those operations, they managed to discover the Ukrainian positions. And right before I start making this video, the sources reported that the Russians managed to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt in Bohdanivka, and the sources are saying that they managed to bypass almost half of the village. Of course, this is like significant progress if it's true. For now, we are not going to change change the map because it's too big progress, so we need to wait more confirmations. But as you can see, some sources are saying that maybe this is exactly what happened in this direction. Furthermore, according to the Russians, they managed to bypass and to advance further along the railways, and they managed to establish control over this stronghold as well. And according to the Russian sources, there are very heavy clashes on the southern part in the vicinity of these motor tracks. So the Russians continue attack from Kromova to the north and to the northwest. So also there are very high chances that before we make this next video, we're going to receive some updates about the Russian progress in this area as well. So as you can see, the situation is getting worse and worse for the Ukrainians, at least according to Telegram reports. We haven't received even a single geolocation, so we need to wait a little bit. So because if it's true, obviously we're going to receive more updates and we will change the color. When talking about Klishchievka, there are no changes on the ground, just regular bombardments from the Russian side, which means that Ukrainians have very difficult situation in this area, that they are not counter-attacking, and the only thing the Ukrainians can do is to move some forces from this area to the north, trying to stop the Russian progress. Now we are moving to Liman area, and according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of clashes on this direction, the Ukrainians lost 250 soldiers and 6 armored vehicles. On Donetsk 270, on Liman 250. So as you can see, the clashes in this area are very heavy, and the Russians published for the first time, probably for the previous months, at least one geolocated video, at least one video that we managed to geolocate, of Russian FAB strikes against 2 cities. This is Nevska, under very heavy bombardments of FAB 500, and a little bit to the north in the vicinity of the villages Stepove and the village by the name of Cherneshina. So 2 FAB strikes took place in this area as well. So something happens in Liman as usually. Probably the Russians launched their attacks in Liman with one purpose: not to allow the Ukrainians to send reinforcement from Bakhmut direction. As you remember, during the Bakhmut operation, the Russians made the same. When they were storming Bakhmut, they launched also support operation on Liman, and now they're doing the same. They're attacking in Bakhmut and launched the support operation in Liman with one purpose: not to allow the Ukrainians to be flexible and to use their limited reserves. The Ukrainians can't do right now anything. They have problems in Avdiivka, they have problems in Liman, they have problems in Bakhmut, and they don't know what is the primary attack of the Russians and which direction is the secondary. When talking about Kupiansk, we also have a lot of updates that we have. Most of them we have already discussed. One more time, Zelensky visited this area, Kherson, Kupiansk, and probably he visited Kupiansk with the same purpose: to inspire the Ukrainian soldiers to counterattack, to fight, and to hold this territory as long as possible, because the situation is critical for the Ukrainians. Obviously, they don't have nothing. They don't have, I'm talking about support supply from the Western countries, or support is very minimal. And Zelensky arrived just to inspire guys from the Ukrainian forces. I'm not sure that it will help, because the situation is really bad. It's really bad on this direction. And according to the information we have, the Russians, after regrouping, if you remember, we discussed the Ukrainians' counterattack, the Russians left the northern part of Sinkovka. Now the Russians have regrouped and launched another offensive operation, but as a result of the latest offensive operation that may be even taking place right now, the Russians, according to sources on the ground, managed to establish control over the northern part of Sinkovka. We haven't received any geolocated confirmations. We need more information, but as I understand, before the next video, that's the morning short update, as I understand, we're going to receive more updates and I will update you. Also, we need to understand that Ukrainians don't have just problems on the ground. They have problems on the border. The Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary has already blockaded the Ukrainians. And for example, this is the video from the Ukrainian-Polish border. Significant number of our cars were stuck. It's economy. It's the money. Of course, it's taxes, and they're stuck on the Polish border. And of course, it will also affect the Ukrainian situation on the ground and along the combat line. Furthermore, the sources are saying that the Russians have improved the production of FPV drones. For example, the Ukrainians are able to produce up to 50,000 drones per month, and the Russians, and they have just let's say 2,000 engineers who can do this, and the Russians are having 6,000 engineers and companies who can build FPV drones. So compare the numbers, compare the difference. Obviously the gap is too big. the gap is too big, and today Zelensky talked a lot about the reintegration of Donbass and Crimea, so he still believes that the Ukrainians are able to do this. But if you ask my opinion, I don't believe him. I don't believe him, and I don't believe that he believes in his own words. But he doesn't have any other option, as I understand. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.